You're making such a great point. So the challenge is, besides the ultimate golden rule, which is not just treat people the way you want to be treated, but treat them the way they want to be treated. I would say that the only golden rule besides that is that there are no golden rules, right? Right. So like that's the problem. We all try to like 10 rules for success or 10 rules for X, Y, or Z. The truth is every situation and every moment is different and new and novel, and it deserves its own unique, customized, personalized response.
There are thousands of people who are laid off. Some have gotten their new job, some are still preparing, some are hopeful, some are not. How can we help them to make their holidays better?
I'd say that first and foremost, try to feel the feelings or emotions inside yourself that you want the other person to feel or catch, right? Or to become infected with. So if you want the other person to feel confidence and you want them to feel peace and you want them to feel optimism, try to genuinely connect with those feelings inside yourself first. When you do that, believe it or not, you become emotionally contagious or infectious with those emotions, even without saying anything, without, sharing a whole lot. They'll feel it from you, and it just sort of catches fire in a way. So I'd say that's first and foremost.
Their family and friends should do this as they meet them.
Yes. So whatever it is you want somebody else to feel, you've got to feel it within yourself first. Mm-hmm. And you can show them better than you can tell them. So that's number one. Okay. Number two, I would do what I could to not bring up the topic unless they bring it up. If they bring it up, right, then it's fine. But no need to remind people of things that they're perfectly aware of, which is the fact that they don't have a job or maybe they're worried about money or something else. If they do bring it up, then I would say the most important thing you can do is listen with an open mind and an open heart. Reflect back what they said in your own words without judgment, and then validate, normalize, and empathize. The whole point of that is you're not giving advice, you're just giving your attention, right? You're not trying to tell them or remind them of what they should do or what they already know or what they don't know that they should know. Instead, just meet them where they are and love them through that conversation in a way that's not overly assertive or judgmental or condemning. Just let there be a little pause, right? Okay. And then at that point, you could ask a few follow-up questions that are, again, innocuous, non-judgmental, just purely curious. At some point, if and when you feel inspired and if you feel like they're open to it, you can ask them how you can help. Is there anything that I can do to help?
That's most important.
Yeah.
To connect with the network. As you were saying, I was remembering, I must have spoken to maybe 79 or 80 folks on the day one of this, and overall, maybe hundreds of people. Only one person asked me, why were you laid off?
Yeah, that's an interesting and bold and uncomfortable question to ask someone. The truth is, to your point, when we're laid off, we're not told a whole lot, if anything. And the things we are told is usually the company line. Not that that's not true and accurate, but there's usually a lot more going on there. Not necessarily about us, but just about the organization, about the larger macroeconomic environment. Yes. So yeah, we don't really get a lot. You don't usually get a lot of great intel through that question. And I would say too, for folks that are trying to respond to those kinds of questions, it's always best to be brief and as vague as possible. I mean, just the answer is, great question. Organizational changes is what I was told.
I say that it's all like macroeconomics, but nobody asks me. People are like, oh, how can I help? And yeah, this is like most of the people actually just laugh it off. Oh, that's why we are talking. I'm so glad. Actually, I love that response.
Yes.
Folks are like somebody, it's like you meet on a dating app and I would say, hey, why did your marriage? I was like, oh, I got lucky to It won't happen. Why would I be interviewing or talking to them? So many people actually gave me that reaction, and the conversation starts at a high note. We laugh, and then it's like, okay, let's.
Well, most of us, I think, know this, but it can be lost on us sometimes, which is that we plant a seed by asking a question. And right, we plant a seed in other people's mind, we plant a seed in our own mind. And then if we're not careful, pretty quickly we start watering that seed in ways that aren't conducive or constructive in terms of creating a conversation that's going to be profitable and productive and enjoyable or rewarding for either or both parties. Yes. Right? So yeah, it's really important. Sometimes we think we only plant seeds by making declarative statements, but we also plant seeds by asking questions.
Totally.
Right? It's important to ask your questions in a way that tees up the conversation for a productive and rewarding and enjoyable one, ideally.
So on that note, maybe I'm guilty. I'm very, very upfront that, hey, why are you looking for a change? I'm like, I got affected by layoff. I had discussion with some other folks. So there are people in 3 categories. Some are like, yeah, I am upfront about it. Second category is they are like, I'm not going to say if they're not going to ask why to explicitly say. Third ones are like, I'm still technically employed and I am too until Jan. So I am saying, yeah, I'm there. But somehow I feel very confident. I don't know if it's my brain is like right or wrong. I really don't care. And I was thinking, why the hell I'm not shy? I'm not embarrassed. I just say it, even if they don't ask me like for anything in the sense, am I overly stating it? As you said, planting the wrong seed.
What we're really vetting for are the underlying premises or assumptions or preconceived notions or conclusions we've drawn that have inspired the conversation or inspired the question, right? So most questions are okay if they're stated pretty objectively, but what's of concern is what's underneath that question. Why are we really asking that question? Do we already suspect that they're making the change for sinister reasons or for reasons that we don't approve of or that we think aren't appropriate? That's what you want to vet for, and you want to let that go if you can and ask the question from a more sort of innocuous, innocent, curious place. Right. So that's why, again, the key is like, let me check inside with myself. Let me make sure that I'm coming from a place emotionally that's at peaceful, that is supportive and kind. And then when you ask the question, even though the question might sound the same, your intonation, the pitch and the volume and the delivery will communicate support and kindness. And it'll come across and read totally differently and allow the conversation to go in a direction that's much more profitable. And you also find you tend to get better intel that way, right? If you come across and ask a question in a very suspicious way, sometimes, sure, you can trigger someone. They can become defensive and reactive, but they might not become defensive and reactive for the reason you think they are. They might become defensive and reactive because they don't like the tone of your question and they don't like the assumption you're making, and maybe somewhere deep inside they feel similarly, but it doesn't mean it's the truth. It just means it's part of their perceptual, sort of reality. So yeah, I think you just do just fine. And if you're wanting to clean that up or clear that up anymore, try to let go of being attached to what the response is either way. The more you can do that, the more you'll be able to ask the question in an innocent way that gets true responses that aren't filtered or censored or edited in ways that prevent you from seeing the full truth, if that makes sense.
So basically you're suggesting, should I tell people explicitly or not? I'm not like scared or something. I'm generally not scared of anything like this. Like whatever, like I am very transparent. So is that a good policy or not?
I think so. It depends. I mean, you're making such a great point. So the challenge is, besides the ultimate golden rule, which is not just treat people the way you want to be treated, but treat them the way they want to be treated. I would say that the only golden rule besides that is that there are no golden rules, right? Right. So like that's the problem. With
that.
Yeah, we all try to like 10 rules for success or 10 rules for X, Y, or Z. The truth is, every situation and every moment is different and new and novel, and it deserves its own unique, customized, personalized response, right? So I would say there's no real blanket response or answer to that. We could say, for instance, honesty is always the best policy. Not true. Not true. If your life is on the line, I promise you that there might be an alternative story that you're wanting to share that's not perfectly honest, that prevents you from being killed or someone else from being killed, for instance, right?
Yeah.
So I would say that, that being said, I would say that in general, transparency is mostly a good thing. It means you have to remember less. It also means that you have to pretend less. And the reason that's good is because we often can't keep up with pretending for very long, with pretension for very long. We can't keep up or remember the lies we've told over the years for very long. So it's best just to tell the truth. And the problem is, when you're trying to tell the truth, because memory is like 50% fallible, we often don't even know what the truth is. So we say, oh, this thing happened, was a kid or I was a young adult. But we're, at least 50% of the time, we're wrong about that. We make up things, we edit things, we leave things out. So it's a great question. I guess it would depend on the circumstance. So if you have a particular circumstance that you're trying to apply this to, we could probably address that particular circumstance. But there's probably not a rule that we could apply to every circumstance with 100% confidence that will serve.
That judgment we need to have, but unnecessarily just because so far, even if I do the research, I haven't had any negative. At least I don't see, people have been very positive when I'm openly sharing that nobody has turned me like, okay, I don't want to talk further because of this situation. And my rationale for this was, if somebody does that, then it's not a right place for me, because I am not like, I can't be happy in a place where I have to pretend all the time.
Yes.
Because that talks about the culture. Because as a product manager, I like taking risks, experiment, and you need that safe place.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
Otherwise, you fail and learn, right? And this is not even a failure.
You're absolutely right about that. Yeah, I mean, that's a great soft rule or intention to set, which is just be yourself, because you're going to end up being yourself anyway, no matter how hard you try. We know how hard behavior changes. Even when you want to change your behavior and you do it intentionally and you have the best help, coaches, therapists, psychologists, behaviorists in the world, you often aren't able to make the change or make the change sustainable. And so you end up just prolonging your pain, right? It's just like you delay it. So you're making a great point here, which is, I think, ultimately being yourself. And the challenge, of course, there is like, if there are things about myself that I do intend and desire to change, let me make sure I change them and put my best foot forward. But let me make sure, to my best of my ability, it's going to be sustainable, right? So it's like dating, right? I mean, I think for a lot of people, they're like, well, how much should I spend on a first date or a second date? And the idea is as much as you can sustain over time. If you spend that amount and it's breaking your bank account, like with the first or second date, yes, then you probably.
Wow.
What's that?
People ask that question?
For sure. Because I think, for instance, like people say, well, with the first date, where should I go? What should I do? I'm like, well, it's also options there. And most people want to make such a great impression, which makes total good sense. But then they'll choose the most expensive restaurant and then have, or a trip somewhere really fancy and beautiful and wonderful. But when you set that kind of precedent, then the expectation is that that's going to continue over a period of time. And if it doesn't continue, that you're not interested anymore, you're cheating on them, or you're, now you've gotten lazy, or you're sort of lethargic around it. So yeah, it's important to try to remember that you want to invest the amount of time, energy, effort, resources, or money that you can sustain over time. And this is as true with sort of being yourself in a dating spot as it is professionally.
My take on dating will be very different, honestly. If any, like as a woman, I don't think somebody can get, at least my kind of persona won't get impressed with that. But it's mostly, are you present, going back to the same things? And are you putting in effort? Not like, of course, sometimes if we are like, because everybody understand it's the first date, we don't even know if you're going to chat further, but going somewhere nice, not like crazy nice, but yes. Then if you like something about someone, then once it's more like, okay, for your own happiness as well. Not like you are from inside feeling like shit, I'm not happy, I'm spending too much. Then it will come on the other, like in this thing, right?
That's right.
The other person also should not have expectations, the unrealistic expectations.
Well, you just nailed it. And I think that right there solves for so much of it. So that were the case if you were, let's say, dating someone and they didn't continue to expect you to show up in the same ways in the future that you have in the past, then no worries, no concerns. But if what happens to so many folks is it's like, okay, I'm going to have this blowout experience the first 1, 2, 3, 5 dates. And then the whole time, to your point, the person's stressed out and anxious because they can't afford, it's like literally can't afford it. Like, how am I going to pay for the valet? And oh my gosh, if she orders dessert or if he orders drink or whatever it is, depending on who's paying, and these days it can be anyone. So that in of itself can be stressful, and that itself pollute the experience of the date. But then beyond that, if people have expectations, then they start to wonder why you're suddenly dialing it back when they expect you, as you continue to invest, to dial up. So many times people are like, I kind of expect this person to dial up. We'll be moving in together soon and they'll take care of all my expenses or whatever. Right.
Oh my God, that's also wrong expectation, because why dial up? It's more not from the money, right? It could be many other things. Because as a woman, I would want to dial down my makeup, my everything. Like, I don't want to be like always, I like, okay, I want to go for hiking dates. I don't want to always wear high heels. So I think women also don't want to keep dialing up to live to the expectations. First date, many people, of course, put something which is not sustainable in everyday life, right? If you really want to enjoy it, depends. At least if you are more nature loving and just want to be yourself, I would not expect, I think if I translate in the same thing, it's like both people are becoming more who they are. rather than dialing up or down, right?
I agree, certainly. I think that's sort of the point. You just nailed it, which is that you want to try and, of course, your best foot forward, but you want to try and be, I suppose, the best version of the best, most sustainable version of yourself as possible, so that it doesn't feel like you're suddenly being a different person 3 months in or 5 months in. You're like, wow, that's interesting. Like all of a sudden, this person has stopped wearing makeup entirely or stopped wearing heels. It was like, that was never them to begin with. It's great that they dress up now and then, but that's not them, And so, yes, you're right. And that's also why, to your point, it's great to have these kinds of conversations around values and lifestyle preferences early on, if you can. It doesn't always happen, and it can be a little, it feel forced or coerced sometimes, and you don't want it to feel forced. But it's good to kind of know where everybody's heading. Although we as human beings often don't know where we even want to head, right? Until you're in it. So you make a great point here around values and lifestyle preferences and the importance of being sort of intentional, but also being yourself.
You encourage such conversations because some people, at least that's my challenge, some guys share so much. Oh, I generally go to the same kind of restaurant. And I'm like, I'm bored after talking to you. Like, I don't want to know every day how you live your life.
Yes.
Like, let's meet and see. But if you're going to go with an algorithm, I am not interested because.
This is a phenomenal insight there. I mean, and Esther Perel talks really eloquently about this, like the importance of, love and desire operate on different sort of principles, really almost diametrically opposite principles. So love is sort of fed by familiarity and comfort and stability and security, and then desire is fed by like a little bit of riskiness and mystery and unpredictability. And so the challenge is to kind of have a mix of them both. And so mystery, having a little bit of mystery, not having the same experiences day in and day out, or communicating every little minute detail of your life in such a way that the other person becomes, or that you become boring. Like
I'm
they
scared
know
also that they're so rigid. Actually, I think if you are so strict in your life on every way, then you are very rigid and life is unpredictable. So I was scared because of that.
Yes.
Like, would you ever change, or would you force me to change? Because I'm pretty open on experimenting different things. Even if I don't like something, I'll give it a shot. But if you're like, okay, I'm only going to go to these 5 restaurants and eat because I love it, I'm somebody who will go to the restaurant I like, but will order something else because I want to see what else it could be, even if I like something.
Yes.
So I'm on the other extreme, maybe.
Well, and that's good to know, right? So, and the beautiful thing about that is you can communicate that without imposing this expectation on the other person to be that. It's like, this is kind of who I am. This is what I love. And if it's a good fit, then good for us. And if it's not a good fit, then good for us. We can go, in separate ways. Not a big deal. There's no frustration about that. No hate about that. It's just, we're just different folks. And it was such an enjoyable experience while it lasted. And now we have a different kind of relationship budding here. Maybe it's a friendship or something. So yeah, that's also why I think it's important to make sure that your happiness and your love and your self-love is rooted within. Then you don't feel such a dramatic or significant loss when someone else doesn't do what you want or isn't what you want, right? It's just like, oh, everything's okay still. I'm just fine. And sometimes that alone lets the other person calibrate or recalibrate themselves in ways that feels like or is closer to what you want, and not in a way that forces them to compromise themselves, right? They don't have to sacrifice themselves. You just find that you're able to find this common ground, and you navigate it so much more beautifully because you're both rooted in self-love and happiness.
This is awesome. I learned a lot, Rob.
Yes, I love conversation with you. It's always a good time.